everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amina. I came across a blog post by someone who recently graduated from a PhD from the University of Oxford, and she discussed 20 things that she wishes she had known before starting on her PhD. And I looked through them and I was nodding my head kind of violently throughout whilst I was reading it. I definitely wish I knew some of these before I started my PhD. It would have made my life a little bit easier. So hopefully if you're starting your PhD anytime soon, or even if you're thinking whether this is a great fit for you or not, then this would definitely be helpful. I used to think that literature reviews were very general and weren't really helpful for my specific topic, but actually when you first start your PhD, especially the first sort of, I would say, year and even the last year, you definitely want to make sure that you're reading lots of reviews to get a general gist of the topic and the subject matter that you are going to be researching. It can help you not only see what others are doing in your field, but also to understand your research aims and how your research is going to fit into the kind of general topic and the general scope of papers in that field. I started to sort of summarize the papers that I was reading, and I wish I did that from the beginning. So sort of as soon as you read a paper, sort of summarize it and maybe write down a few key points that you might want to include in your thesis, maybe in the introduction. You might want to include a certain thing that was mentioned, because later on, kind of trying to scramble through hundreds of papers that you've read to find that one point that you remember that was really interesting becomes an almost impossible task. The second one is to write everything down. Now, I know for a fact that when you first start in the lab, you think that you want to seem like you know everything, and you don't want to seem like you're taking too many notes like an eager student, but you want to be that eager student. You want to take lots of notes. Never think, I'll remember that later. Never think that you have the capacity to remember so many different methods, techniques, quantities, concentrations, especially in a wet lab like I was in. It does get very heavy and detailed very quickly. So always have a pen and paper at hand from day one. Have a pen and paper at hand and write everything down. Keep things as organized as possible. At the start, I was sort of only working on 1 or 2 small projects, and so it was okay to be a little bit messy and a little bit all over the place. But as time progresses, as your project evolves, you end up working on a plethora of different things. It becomes quite cumbersome to have lots of little bits of experiment here, there, and everywhere, and different fridges in different areas and different parts of the lab. So really try to stay organized as much as you can from the beginning. Have your boxes, have them labeled, have a very clear system that you can understand, but also someone else can understand. Because what happens is at the end of your PhD, you actually have to pass over or hand over your notes and your solutions and everything that you have to the next person or to your supervisor. And what can happen is, if you're not organized, you end up spending a lot of time organizing at the end, and that was something that I kind of regretted when I got to the end, because I had to sort of organize my freezer and all the space that I had, because I had kind of just thrown things in as I went along. To start writing your thesis now, it doesn't matter if you've just started in the lab or if you're a year in or 2 years in, start writing your thesis already. It's never too early to start writing your thesis. Even if you don't necessarily use those chapters that you started to write or those sections that you started to write, it doesn't matter. For a lot of people, just starting their thesis is the hardest part. So if you started writing bits and bobs already, then it helps later on when you can just collate everything together. Now, the sections that you can start writing from day one are the methods and the introduction section. And one way that I find really helpful to be able to start writing a thesis is to build a habit and to build a routine. Now, a lot of writers find that they have something that's called writer's block, where they get to a point where they can't write anymore. And I think the key thing is to be able to write fluently and to be able to write sort of just freely, is to get into a habit where you force yourself to write 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, regardless of whether you feel like you have anything to say or not. This is to bring Skillshare to your attention to help with this. So Skillshare is sponsoring this segment of the video. Skillshare is an online learning community that has lots of creative classes that you can explore from the comfort of your own home. Classes are designed for real life, so you can fit them into your schedule. Whether you have 35 minutes when you're allowing a gel to run and you just want to kind of fit in something during that time, or whether you have an experiment that's failed and you have an afternoon free and you don't know what to do with it, Skillshare can fit into your life quite flexibly. That allows you to sort of deepen those passions that you might have and that you might want to explore. There's a class that I found that I think will really help with writing a PhD as well, and it's called the Writer's Toolkit: 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit, and it's led by Simon, author and screenwriter. He actually lists 6 steps to write successfully, and one of them is essentially sticking to a routine. And he mentions that you want to stick to a routine where you give yourself a dedicated time during the day, a dedicated length of time during the day where you write regardless, like I said, regardless of what your condition is or whether you want to write or not. So when you do get to third year, or when you do get to second year and you have to write your kind of mid PhD dissertation, you've built that habit already. It won't be a roadblock where you'll stumble. So the first 500 subscribers that click in the link in my description bar will be receiving 2 free months of premium Skillshare membership that allows you to get all of the online classes for free for 2 whole months, which is amazing. But Skillshare is also incredibly affordable. An annual subscription is only less than $10 a month, which is absolutely amazing considering how much one in-person class costs elsewhere. And do let me know if you have signed up to Skillshare, which classes you have been enjoying and which classes you would recommend. Be honest with your supervisor. Now, this is something that I think I sort of regret not doing. When I say be honest, I mean sort of if you don't understand something, just say you don't understand something. If you don't know why you're doing something, if you can't quite remember what the exact concentrations are or the exact solutions are, or just whatever it is, then be very honest and just say, I can't remember this, I don't understand. I think as overachievers, PhD students tend to sort of think that they have to know everything. Well, if you knew everything, you wouldn't be a PhD student. So make sure that you're always asking questions. And I think for me, I didn't necessarily do it with my supervisor, but I'd ask my lab mate. So if I didn't understand something, I tend to ask someone who is senior, like a postdoc in the lab. I'd say, do you know why that, you know, he said to do this and that? When actually, if I had just asked him, I would have got a straight up answer, and it actually, I think it's quite admirable to say that you don't understand and to make it out that you understand everything. So from the beginning, just be honest, don't be a yes person. Back up your work as often as you can. Now again, something that I'm a very like organized person in this sense, so I definitely made sure that I did that from the beginning, but have a method again where you back up your work and your thesis and your writing and all your data. I think nowadays we have sort of a lot of online backup systems like Google Drive and Dropbox, etc., that you can kind of back things on remotely and online. So I used to use Dropbox, and it meant that I didn't have to think about it. It was automated. Everything that I did was saved onto Dropbox, so without thinking about it, things were backed up remotely already. Things never go to plan, and I mean that is the nature of a PhD, and I think if you don't understand that and if you can't comprehend and accept that, then I don't think a PhD is for you. Things never go to plan, and I think I struggled with this quite a lot because I am the kind of person who likes structure. I like to know how things will pan out. I like to be able to plan my next move in life, whereas with a PhD you've got a deadline of 3 to 4 years, but you can't predict what's going to happen during that time. You can come to the lab one day and your cells are infected, and that's that for the week. You can come in and the microscope doesn't work, and that's you screwed for the whole month. So it's really important to always make sure you have like not a backup plan, but also almost sort of a way of kind of filling up time where you may have planned something instead. So instead of maybe doing that experiment, if things don't go to plan, you can maybe read some papers or attend a seminar or do some wider reading, and I think it's really important to have that in the back of your mind. Things don't always go to plan, and most of the time, and I think when I say this to people who are doing a PhD, it really reassures them that most of the time your results, the bulk of your results, are acquired in the last year. I mean the last 6 months actually. Last 6 months to a year is when the bulk of your results of your thesis are acquired. The first sort of 2.5 years is just preliminary work, sort of work leading up to that you're going to include in your final thesis. There's a lot of work that you'll do that won't be included in your final thesis, just to let you know that. And don't forget that your thesis is a story. You have to be able to sort of tell that story somehow, and so if it doesn't quite fit into that story, whether it's relevant or not, you won't necessarily include it. So just be aware that not everything you'll do will be included, and not everything goes to plan, and you have to accept that and just know that's the nature of a PhD. It's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. And I think the better you are accepting that, the more pleasurable your PhD experience will be overall. I'll leave the blog post down below because I knew that there were a lot more tips listed. I picked out the ones that I resonated with the most. Do let me know which one you want to implement into your future practice. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.